There was a time when the Germany national football team didn't just play in the World Cup, they controlled it. 4 titles. Generations of players built on discipline, precision, and a mentality that seemed almost impossible to break. When Germany entered a tournament, the question was never if they would go far, but how far they would go. And then, suddenly, everything stopped making sense. Back-to-back World Cups. And they were gone before the knockout stage even began. Not just defeated, but exposed. The system that once defined them looked slow, predictable, and disconnected. For the first time in decades, Germany didn't feel like Germany anymore. But now, something is changing again. The performances look sharper. The team looks more balanced. There's energy, control, and a new sense of direction that hasn't been there in years. People are starting to believe. Quietly at first, then more confidently. You can see it in the way they play, in the way they build attacks, in the way they dominate possession. It feels like a comeback is forming right in front of us. And yet, even with all of that, there's still a strange feeling that something isn't quite right. Because teams don't collapse like that and just come back without a cost. Not at this level, not at the World Cup. And if you look closely enough, beneath the structure, beneath the improvements, beneath everything that makes this team look ready again, there is still one question that refuses to go away. A question that could decide whether this is the story of a comeback or the beginning of another disaster at World Cup 2026. On the surface, this version of the Germany national football team looks exactly like the comeback everyone has been waiting for. The structure is cleaner, the transitions are faster, and most importantly, the balance feels real. This is no longer a team trying to force an identity that doesn't fit. Instead, it looks like a system that finally understands its players. In midfield and attack, there is a level of creativity that Germany simply did not have in recent tournaments. Florian Wirtz moves between lines with intelligence and precision, constantly finding spaces that don't seem to exist. Alongside him, Jamal Musiala brings something even more unpredictable. The kind of individual brilliance that can break any defensive structure in a single moment. And it's not just about individual talent. The way Germany controls matches now feels different. They are more patient, more composed, and far more comfortable dictating the tempo. The ball moves with purpose, not hesitation. Even without overwhelming speed, they create pressure through positioning, through timing, through understanding. It's the kind of football that gives the illusion of control, the sense that nothing can go wrong if they simply keep playing their game. Compared to the chaos of previous tournaments, this looks like stability. Compared to the uncertainty before, this looks like direction. That's why many people are starting to believe again. Because when you watch this team, it doesn't feel broken anymore. It feels organized, intelligent, and dangerous, in a way that Germany hasn't been for years. Everything seems to be aligning at the right time, just before the biggest stage. But that's exactly where the danger begins. Because when a team starts to look this complete, this convincing, this close to perfection, it often means the real problem hasn't been seen yet. At the center of this transformation is one man, and everything about this version of the Germany national football team begins with Julian Nagelsmann. He wasn't brought in to maintain a system, he was brought in to rebuild one that had already collapsed. And if you look at his career, that's exactly the kind of situation he thrives in. Years ago, when he took over Hoffenheim, they were sitting near the bottom of the table, drifting toward relegation with no clear identity. Within months, everything changed. The structure became sharper, the players more confident, and a team that looked lost suddenly knew exactly how it wanted to play. What followed wasn't just survival, it was transformation. From crisis to Champions League, built on tactical intelligence and the ability to adapt faster than anyone else. That same mindset is now shaping Germany. Under Nagelsmann, this is not a rigid system locked into one idea. It shifts constantly. On paper, it might start as a 4-2-3-1, but in reality, it evolves depending on the moment. Fullbacks step into midfield, attackers drop deeper, and the team reorganizes itself in ways that are designed to control space rather than just occupy it. It's modern, fluid, and extremely difficult to predict when it works. And recently, it has been working. Germany looked more organized, more connected, and far more dangerous because every player seems to understand their role within a bigger structure. But that's where the risk begins to quietly grow. Because systems like this rely on timing, precision, and constant decision-making under pressure. They don't leave much room for error. And at the World Cup, where one mistake can decide everything, complexity can become a weakness just as quickly as it becomes a strength. If the structure breaks for even a moment, if the players hesitate, if the rhythm is disrupted, there is no simple fallback. And when that happens, the same system that makes Germany look so controlled could be the very thing that exposes them when it matters most. And this is where everything starts to unravel. Not in the system, not in the structure, but in the one place that decides matches more than anything else. Because for all the control, all the intelligence, all the fluid movement that this version of the Germany national football team has built, there is still one question that refuses to go away. Who finishes the chances when it actually matters? On paper, the answer seems clear. Kai Havertz leads the line, but not as a traditional striker. He drops deep, links play, creates space, and allows players like Florian Wirtz and Jamal Musiala to attack from more dangerous positions. Within the system, it makes sense. It keeps the team fluid, unpredictable, and difficult to mark. It fits perfectly with everything Nagelsmann is trying to build. But football at the highest level, especially at the World Cup, doesn't always reward the most elegant system. It rewards the team that can turn one moment into a goal. And that's the problem. Germany can dominate possession, control tempo, and create openings. But when the moment comes, when the game slows down, when the space disappears, they don't always have that one player who can impose a final decision on the match. The kind of striker who doesn't need 5 chances, who doesn't need perfect build-up, who simply scores when everything else breaks down. That absence doesn't always show in comfortable games. But in tight matches, in knockout football, it becomes impossible to ignore. Because at that level, you don't get 10 chances. Sometimes you get 1. And if that one moment isn't taken, everything else you did before becomes irrelevant. That's how teams with less control, less structure, and even less quality can still win. And that's exactly where this version of Germany becomes vulnerable. They can play better, look better, and still walk away defeated. Not because they were outplayed, but because they didn't have the one thing that decides everything in the end. And this is exactly why that weakness matters more than anything else. Because the World Cup doesn't reward the team that plays the best football over 90 minutes. It rewards the team that survives the one moment that defines everything. When the knockout stage begins, the rhythm changes, the space disappears, the tempo slows down, and suddenly, all the control Germany has built starts to mean less and less. Because now, every attack is heavier, every decision carries pressure, and every missed chance becomes something you can't take back. This is where the gap between a great team and a winning team is exposed. Imagine a match where Germany controls possession, dictates the pace, and creates more opportunities. On the other side, a team with one player who only needs a single moment. A player like Kylian Mbappe doesn't need the game to flow perfectly. He doesn't need structure to be flawless. He just needs one situation, one mistake, one opening. And suddenly, the entire match changes. That's the difference. Not control, not tactics, but decisiveness. Because knockout football is never about who looks better. It's about who finishes. Germany could dominate a game, build it exactly the way they want, and still lose because they couldn't convert when it mattered most. And once that happens, there's no second chance, no correction, no recovery. The tournament moves on without you. That's why this isn't just a small issue hidden inside the system. It's the kind of problem that only reveals itself when it's already too late. And if Germany carry this into the World Cup, it won't be exposed in the group stage. It will appear in that one match where everything is on the line. The kind of match where you don't need to be better. You just need to be more ruthless. And this is where the reality becomes impossible to ignore. Because when you place the Germany national football team next to the very best teams in the world, the difference is no longer about structure or control. It's about certainty. The kind of certainty that only comes from having players who decide matches without needing everything around them to be perfect. Germany today look organized, intelligent, and far more complete than they have been in years. But being better than before is not the same as being better than everyone else. You can already see it in the highest level games. Moments where Germany play well, even dominate for long stretches, but still fail to fully impose the final outcome. Against elite opponents, control becomes fragile. One missed chance, one lapse in concentration, and suddenly all the balance they built starts to disappear. Because at that level, the margin for error is almost zero. Teams like Spain don't need many openings to punish you. Teams with experience at the very top understand how to wait, how to suffer, and then how to strike when it matters most. That's the uncomfortable truth. Germany are improving, but improvement alone doesn't win World Cups. You need reliability in the biggest moments, not just potential. You need players who don't hesitate when everything is on the line. And right now, there is still a question about whether this team has that level of certainty, or whether they are still one step below the very top tier. So the real question is no longer whether Germany are back. The real question is whether they are ready to win when the game refuses to go their way. Because at the World Cup, it always comes down to that one moment where nothing is perfect anymore. And that is exactly where champions are separated from everyone else. So now, everything comes back to the same question that has followed the Germany national football team from the very beginning of this story. Not whether they have improved, not whether they look more complete, but whether this version of Germany can actually survive when perfection disappears. Because on the surface, the pieces are finally there. The structure makes sense. The midfield has creativity. The system has identity. And for the first time in years, this feels like a team that belongs among the contenders again. But the World Cup has never been decided by how a team looks when everything is working. It is decided in the moments when nothing is working at all. When the game becomes tight, when chances disappear, when pressure turns every decision into a risk. That is where clarity matters. That is where instinct matters. That is where one action can define everything that came before it. And that is exactly where the doubt still exists. Because if Germany reach that moment, if they find themselves in a match where control is no longer enough, where the system no longer guarantees solutions, then everything will depend on something they have not fully proven yet. The ability to end the game when it refuses to be controlled. This could be the story of a comeback that restores everything people once feared about Germany. Or it could be another chapter in a pattern that no one expected to see twice, let alone 3 times. The difference between those two outcomes may come down to a single moment that hasn't happened yet. So the question is simple. When that moment arrives, will this Germany team take it, or will it be the reason everything falls apart again?